One of the most compelling moments in the last 20 years or so for me was a time when I lived in Canada, and I was going through many different challenges. I had some decisions to make, and I decided that I would go to a golf course in order to play by myself. I think it was on a Monday morning, or sometime on the Monday, in the hope that no one would be there. And essentially, the golf course was empty. There was nobody there, except that I saw a gentleman who just finished putting on the first green, and which was 500 yards away. And so I thought, well, I would take my time because, quite frankly, I had no interest in playing with anybody. And if you ever play golf, you know that you always get paired with people and so on. And I didn't want that, so I just wanted to play by myself. There was nobody coming behind me. Anyhow, I arrived at the second hole, and the man was sitting there waiting for me. And quite frankly, I was a little bit upset. And I remember thinking to myself, I wanted to play by myself. And I had actually prayed and saying, I want to play by myself. I want time. I want to hear from God, which sounds quite religious, to be honest with you. But that's what I prayed. That's what I felt at the time, that I would walk on this course and somehow or another I would have some kind of great revelation that would change my life. Now, and in some ways I did, but let me share the story first. So he asked me, this gentleman, Nick, I can't remember for sure his name, but we call him Nick to make it a little more personal. He said, would you like to play together? And I thought to myself, no, but that would be rude. So I said, sure. And inside I said to myself, well, if I'm going to play golf with this guy, I am going to do everything in my power to convert him to my beliefs. Now, at the time, I understood beliefs to be a mental concept, a narrative, a story, a dogma, a doctrine, a certain way of seeing, which is essentially, and for those who have heard me teach, is something that is a faith of the neocortex. In other words, you got to agree with my story, which is why it doesn't help you experience mental well-being. Now, just stay with me here. So anyhow, I decided I would share everything I knew. And he exuded such calm and peace and such unconditional love. At the same time, he says, well, I don't see the world quite like you do. He said, I'm spiritual, but I don't have the same religious beliefs as you do. And I was so dumbfounded, actually, by the fact that this man exuded more peace and love and grace and joy than I did. In fact, I felt pretty miserable, to be honest with you. And I was supposed to be the steward of the truth. I was a carrier of the truth. I was going to explain to him the truth. And I was more bound up than he was as far as it was easy for me to tell this guy was actually living a life of love and peace. He was the most kind and gentle and just a wonderful man. And as I came to the 18th hole, we parted ways, and I went my ways. And I remember thinking to myself, I came here to hear, quote unquote, from God, and he would speak to me and give me some great revelation. What good was this? I couldn't even convince this man that I was right and he was wrong. And so years passed, actually. And one day I was sitting on the bed in my house. It was 2008, and this was 4 years after I had this encounter with Nick. Sitting on my bed here in California. I'd moved to California at the time. And our bed was at where we lived at the time. It's a big canyon, and so it was overlooking this canyon. And I looked over the canyon, and I was feeling this incredible disappointment. I was angry. I was dealing with this plethora of emotions, and so many things that in my life just didn't make sense, even though quite frankly, at the time, I was speaking in some of the largest churches in the world. See, I was speaking, I could tell you some of the churches, but I was speaking in a church of 250,000 people. I was speaking in another church of 60,000, another 25,000 people. I'm not saying that to boast. I'm just saying that was the condition. And I was then also having campaigns and so on. So I was, in many ways, you could say I was doing quite well in the Christian world, but I wasn't free on the inside. And I simply sat on that bed and I said to myself, Jesus said, you shall know the truth and the truth shall make you free. But I am not free. And if I'm not free, I must be missing something about the truth. And then I thought about, well, I know a lot of people, I know a lot of preachers. I know a lot of well-known preachers. And I have to be honest with you, I have not met one person yet that exuded the kind of love, peace, and joy that Nick did those 4 years earlier. And it was like, it was really something that I'd never even seen before. And so I started thinking about this. And then as I began to meditate, and I meditated on grace, peace, and love. I started with peace, or actually with gratitude, and then with peace, and then with love, and then with grace and joy and awe. And I did it essentially based on Jesus and a revelation of Jesus. But I didn't experience some kind of religious Jesus. The ideas that I had about Jesus and all of that, but it was an inner awareness. It was something deeper than the story. The story didn't matter as much. The dogma didn't matter as much. The having everything correct and on the dotted line as far as this is what I believe and this is what I stand for, it didn't really matter. What really mattered was having an experience of peace, inner stillness, and love, and a sense of grace. I wish I could say that everything was perfect, but I noticed there was a subtle change that began to take place in me, that I didn't have the same emotional outbursts or disappointments, or I no longer dealt with depression or this plethora of negative emotions like fear or guilt or shame. And if I had some setbacks, it may affect me for 5 minutes, but then I had a way to just kind of come back to that place of inner stillness. And I began to think more back about the story about Nick. And I thought about what was it about Nick that really was transformative? It was his inner realm, his sense of peace, his sense of love, his sense of grace. It wasn't the story that he had the story right. And then I started thinking about what is spirituality. Spirituality has nothing to do with words. Nothing to do with the story. Stories can be made up. Some stories are true, some stories are not true. Some dogmas is more true than others as far as is it factual or not. But when it comes to love and peace, that's something deeper. That's something beyond mental concepts. It is something that is more, I would say, akin to God. God is love. God is life. God is light. And it said that Jesus was full of grace and truth. And so then I began to look into the Aramaic and study the word truth. You know, Jesus spoke Aramaic. I mean, he didn't speak Greek. He didn't speak English. He didn't, he may have spoken some Greek. I know for sure he didn't speak English. And, they didn't even have the Hebrew language at the time because it had basically died out. So Jesus spoke Aramaic, and the word for truth in Aramaic is shrara, which means an inner light. Now, has nothing to do with the outside. It's an inner light. And I began to realize that as I meditate, as I spend time in meditation, what am I doing? I am awakening more and more to this inner light. And that inner light is truly the essence of life. It has nothing to do with external concepts. It's nothing to do with right beliefs. My religion is better than your religion. It's nothing to do with that. It's about something that is much deeper, something that is much more transformational. It's about being expression, an emanation of light and life and love and peace and goodness and compassion in the world. To shine as Jesus did. To be an expression even for the many people that society hated and were ostracized. And I think it's so far away from where we see, especially American Christianity today. That is very much about dogmas, very much about religious beliefs and believing the right way. And I try to explain it this way for people who are interested in neuroscience. It appeals to this part of the brain. But do you know that your brain, when you die, is going to rot in the grave? We spend so much time trying to convince this thing. Here is the midbrain, which is the emotional brain. It releases chemicals in your body, which then causes more thoughts. That causes us to create all the chaos in our mind. And here's our subconscious, the cerebellum, where all our attitudes and habits and everything, the way we think, the way we process information is stored, and how that all affects your body, how it affects our health. But you see, you are something more deeply than your thoughts, your brain. I mean, if you come from a Christian background, you surely must believe that you are not your brain. In fact, I remember from back in the days, this teacher, Kenneth Hagin, some of you may have heard of him. He said, you are not your mind, you're not your body. You live in it, but you are spirit. And spirit is not something that you see. And we have another word for it today that I think is very appropriate, and that is consciousness. At the very core, you are consciousness. The brain, this thing here, likes to tell you who you are, that you are something that is wonderful, something that is great. We call that ego. The ego needs to feel superior. The ego needs to feel different than somebody else. But you see, at the very core, we are all spirit. And when you awaken to that reality, and that's why meditating on love, grace, and peace is so transformative, because when you awaken to this deeper essence of who you are, you awaken to your union with God. And when you awaken to your union with God, there is a transformation that takes place. It doesn't happen overnight, because remember, this has taken a long time to be stored in your cerebellum, your subconscious, all the experiences you've had in life, all the knowledge that you have accumulated, all the things that you heard, all the things that religion has taught you, all the things that you hear about politics, all the things you've learned in school, all those different things and what your parents taught you. It has been stored here. It's been scrambled together in your subconscious that now controls how you see the world and how you perceive reality. So the way to be free, the way to really come to a deeper understanding of life, you got to move beyond this and awaken to spirit. And how do you do that? Through meditation. Because it's through meditation. Psalm 4 says, meditate on your bed and be still. And it says actually meditate within your heart. Why? Because according to the culture that Jesus was raised in, there were two words for spirit. One was ruach, Now, Ruach was the universal spirit. It was God's spirit. Now, the word simply means wind or breath. And that kind of makes sense because the way they would, they would not have access to a brain like this back then. They wouldn't then talk that language, right? So the way they saw that which you cannot explain, that which is invisible, the very fact that you have life today, you cannot take an x-ray and find consciousness. You cannot find spirit. But it's there because it's essentially that which, the canvas upon which life and every experience is painted. So what I'm saying to you is when you come to a place of inner stillness, when you come to a place of pure meditation, this Ruach, as I said, Ruach was a flow, like a wind, like the air. And then there was the individual spirit, or the localized spirit, but they called it soul. And the word for that was nephesh, but it also meant wind or breath. And it's amazing. Think about it this way. You should like to explain it this way. I'm breathing in right now. And what I'm breathing in is something universal. But what I breathe out, which is my breath, is is the same air, but the way it comes out now is dependent upon what I have eaten, what's inside of me. So if what I come out is no longer fresh, it's because of what is inside of me, my mouth or whatever. And it's the same thing with us as spirit and God being spirit, and then the nephesh, which is our soul. And the way they saw this was there was a spirit and a soul, and that which was the middle field. So in other words, there was the same thing, but what was the middle field? They said it was the heart, or leba. So when it talks about meditating within your heart, what is it actually saying? It's saying that when you meditate within your heart, you are purifying the middle field between that which exists everywhere and that which flows out of you. So when you meditate on peace, you reach a place of inner stillness where you're completely, just simply aware. And you experience a deep inner peace. You're no longer thinking. You're no longer preoccupied with thoughts. You're just aware. You just say, this is so incredible. And out of that arises a sense of deep love. And when I say love, I mean a sense of union. You feel like I'm in you, you are in me, God is in me, I'm in him. It kind of removes all the barriers and all the barriers of separation between us. And I'm just aware of this incredible presence because the heart is no longer stuck or broken or filled with the dirt and the darkness, but the light shines through. The inner light that flows from the Ruach through the heart into your nephesh, the soul, into your experience as a human being is completely open and clear, and you are free. And so if we just make the story of Jesus a doctrine or something that people have to sign the dotted line on, it's not going to change people's lives. But if we awaken to the true essence of the I am that Jesus speaks about, the I am that is an expression, let me put it that way, it's an expression of love and peace and grace in the world, then this message then this Christianity that we like to talk about and we like to propagate, it's not so much about being right and getting people to raise the hand and come running to the front and accept Jesus, and then for the 99.9% of them you will never see in church. It's different. It's about awakening to a deeper reality where you feel this incredible oneness with life. And then it changes how we see one another. I no longer see you as, oh, you're just a terrible human being. No, sure, we can all recognize that some people do things that are pretty crazy. But at the deeper level, we see the very depth of the inner being, and we recognize the sacredness in all. And as Paul says in the Bible, Christ is all and in all. Now think about that. Some people say, well, he just was referring to Christians. Well, read it again. You go to Colossians 3, it doesn't say that at all. In Colossians 3. And then Ephesians 4 says that the one God, Father, above all, through all, and in all. You explain that. In other words, God is everywhere. But the fact is that our minds, this has blinded us to the reality of God. And so if the church tries to preach to this mind, to change this mind, to improve the mind, then all that we're doing, or getting the mind to say, well, believe the way I believe, that is egoic. But if we help people awaken to something deeper within them, that is pure love, pure peace, then there is real transformation. But if we stand up and talk about this and there is no change in us, how can we possibly help others? So anyhow, I did not prepare any of this. I just decided I was sitting here on a Saturday afternoon and I wanted to share this with you. I just decided it's time to turn on my recorder and just record this. And I hope you got something from it. Thank you very much. By the way, I hate to promote and talk about my book, but if you want to really, some of the things I've shared here, if you want to get more insights on these things, I really encourage you to read the book, pick it up. I go into great length to explain a lot of these different things. And the book is called Life Ascending, Unlocking Mental Wellbeing Through Timeless Wisdom and Neuroscience. I got lots of wonderful praise, and I'm so grateful for that. But really, all of it is rather insignificant unless it really helps you, unless it is a guide. Now, this book will, of course, touch this part here to begin with, but I hope that you will, through the book, actually get something that is much deeper, that it will point to something much deeper within you, which is your spirit, and awakening to that which transcends all things, and come to a greater sense of peace and joy and grace in your life. Thank you for listening.